our dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition of our program Africa Today. In today's edition, we are going to talk about the Egyptian-African ties in light of the recent meetings by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi with the African leaders. President Sisi received Namibian former President Sam Nujoma. The meeting was attended by the head of the intelligence service, Abbas Kamel, and the Namibian ambassador to Egypt. The presidential spokesman, Ambassador Bassem Radi, said that President Sisi welcomed the former Namibian president, expressing Egypt's appreciation of the deeply rooted relations that bind the two brotherly countries. President Sisi also congratulated Nujoma on being awarded for the prize of Kamat Boutros Ghali Foundation in appreciation of his efforts in settling disputes in the African continent, as well as his long struggle to realize Namibia's independence. For his part, the Namibian guest hailed the Egyptians' vital role under the leadership of President Sisi in realizing peace and security in Africa. Also, President Sisi received on Saturday Zambian Foreign Minister Joseph Malangi. To shed more light on these meetings, as well as the importance of the Egyptian-African ties, we are very much delighted to have with us over the phone political analyst Dr. Salah Abdallah. Dr. Abdallah, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Welcome, Dr. Abdallah. Dr. Abdallah, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Dr. Abdallah. Sir, President Sisi received the Namibian former President Sam Nujoma and the Zambian Foreign Minister. How do you see the timing of these visits to Egypt?
Well, of course, this meeting is very important in this time, because as you see, there is many incidents happen, especially in East Africa. There is war in Ethiopia and instability in other parts of Africa. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi efforts to keep peace and stability in Africa is continuous since he was the leader of the African unity. He continued that policy. He didn't stop it. That's why he received the officials from many African countries to continue what he starts. Peace and stability in Africa is very important to the continent and is very important to Egypt. Of course, Zambia is one of the countries which in the side of East Africa. She is nearer to Tanzania and nearer to Uganda and nearer to Ethiopia. That's why it's very important to negotiate with. Also, Namibia is one of the important countries in Africa. So the meetings leads to or necessitates that peace in the area, especially in the West and the Middle Africa, is very important to the people of Africa, to the people of Egypt, for the stability, for fighting against terrorists and fighting against disease and corona. So the agenda is full, and the African countries is needed to cooperate in this time to do their own best for stability, especially through the African Union, which they are all members, and they can share in the efforts of Egypt, and they can share the efforts of President Sisi to how to find a way for security and stability in Africa.
Yes. Dr. Abdallah, How do you weigh the importance of ties with southwestern and southern African countries like Zambia and Namibia? And how do you see the role here that Egypt is playing for the whole continent?
Egypt is playing a great role to the African continent. And in fact, President Sisi is very active, and he gives importance to the security and to the peace, to raise the standard of economy, and to connect all the African countries together. He is doing a great role in that. And of course, he is seeking the cooperation of the leaders of Africa with him. That's why the importance of these meetings, which he usually do with the African leaders. Of course, as I told, Zambia, as example, is a country nearer to River Nile countries, and it can be very important in the trying to share in the peace negotiations, especially in a country like Ethiopia and Eritrea. There is great danger that the instability in Ethiopia and in Eritrea can be extended to the other countries in Africa. And of course, Zambia one of the countries which is nearer to that event. Also, Namibia is beside Zambia and beside South Africa. And South Africa now is the leader of the African Union. So Namibia can have a role with South Africa to encourage for playing a great role in finding peace solutions, and of course in support Egypt in the problems of the Ethiopian dam, which of course up till now Ethiopia doesn't give a true answer for the needs of Sudan and Egypt. Of course, the efforts which is being done by President Sisi is a great effort for peace and stability and for peaceful solving of the problem of the African countries.
Indeed. Dr. Abdallah, during the meeting with the former Namibian President Sisi congratulated him on being awarded the prize of Kimat Boutros Ghali Foundation for his efforts in settling disputes in the African continent, as well as his long struggle to realize Namibia's independence. Doctor, what can you tell us about that award?
The former president of Namibia is one of the African leaders which play a great role. You know, there is a team of African leaders which is playing a role in the country's independence and fighting against colonialism and leading their own countries in the difficult times which is between the military colonialism and independence and the changes which usually happen in the society. The former president of Namibia is one of this team. Maybe he is the last one of this team, and he do a great role for his country, for independence, and for transferring community from the stage of colonialism to the stage of freedom. And he has a great fingerprint in his country for the peaceful changes which happen there. So he can consider one of the important leader and respected leaders in Africa. And his meeting with President Sisi is a kind of greetings to that man and to his efforts for his country, which is very important to the continent, to know that there is a leader doing their own best for their own people.
Indeed. Actually, the Namibian guest hailed the Egyptian role in realizing peace and security in the African continent and in implementing the silencing of the guns initiatives as well as solving different African crises. Dr. Abdullah, how successful has the initiative been so far in solving the African crises?
Well, Egypt usually doing the efforts. Yeah. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it's not, depending on many factors in the African countries, because not all the threat in one hand. But of course, the efforts which Egypt is doing is very effective in the continent. It helps in solving many problems in Africa. As example, the South Sudan crisis, Egypt do their own best for that. The North Sudan and the agreement with the oppositions, Egypt has a great role in that. Egypt has a great role in doing many projects in many African countries to solve their own problem, like the dam in Tanzania. Egypt is using their own effort within the African Union for supporting the African countries in fighting against the COVID crisis. Yeah. So Egypt is very active and playing a great role. But of course, it needs also to be supported by active countries and by active wishes of solving the problems. Some countries like Ethiopia, as example, they are creating the problems, which is this, of course, making obstacles to the efforts. But anyhow, Egypt is taking a good role and a diplomatic role in how to solve the problems and to increase the stability and security in Africa. Yes. And I think most of the African appreciate what Egypt and what President Sisi is doing for the continent.
Indeed, Dr. Salah Abdullah, our political analyst, always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much, sir. And an ancient sarcophagus more than 2,500 years old was discovered in a vast necropolis in Upper Egypt, along with at least 140 ancient coffins and statues. More in the following story by Samah al-Sharif.
At least 100 ancient coffins and 40 gilded statues have been discovered in a massive burial site south of the Egyptian capital, Cairo. Authorities made the announcement on Saturday. Some of the colorful sealed sarcophagi, which were buried more than 2,500 years ago, contained mummies wrapped in cloth. The finds date back to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Egypt from around 320 BC to 30 BC, and from the late period between 664 and 332 BC, and are now being displayed in a makeshift exhibit at the feet of the famed step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. The Ministry of Antiquities said the artifacts would be moved to 3 Cairo museums, including the new Grand Egyptian Museum that Egypt is building near the famed Giza pyramids. It said it would announce another discovery at the Saqqara necropolis later this year. The discovery at the famed necropolis is the latest in a series of archaeological finds in Egypt. Since September, antiquities authorities revealed at least 140 sealed sarcophagi, with mummies inside most of them in the same area of Saqqara. Officials said Egyptian archaeologists found other shafts full of coffins, well gilded, well painted, well decorated. The Saqqara site is part of the necropolis at Egypt's ancient capital of Memphis that includes the famed Giza pyramids, as well as smaller pyramids at Abu Sir, Dahshur, and Abu Rawash. The ruins of Memphis were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the 1970s.
A Russian Naval Logistics Center and a repair yard is to be established in Sudan under a new government. More in the following report.
Russia will establish a naval logistics center and repair yard in Sudan under a new agreement signed by Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin on November 6, but just made public this week. According to the deal's text, the Naval Logistics Center will host up to 300 people. This figure includes both naval service members and civilian personnel. The base can host up to 4 naval vessels, including nuclear-powered ones. The Sudanese government will provide Russia with the necessary port infrastructure and a piece of land free of charge. The agreement says Russia will be allowed to transfer any kind of military equipment or munition, equipment or material through Sudanese ports that are required for the center. The center will function under Russia's jurisdiction, and the agreement will last for 25 years, with the option to renew it for another 10-year period. The Naval Logistics Center in Sudan will be Russia's first military base in Africa since the collapse of the Soviet Union. During that time, the country had a permanent naval base in Somalia. A few years ago, Russia began looking for ways to establish a permanent base in Djibouti, which already hosts Chinese and American naval bases.
Tensions are escalating in the Western Sahara between the Moroccan government and the Polisario Front, threatening the fragile truce that has been in place there since 1991. More details.
Morocco has launched a military operation in a United Nations patrolled buffer strip in Western Sahara, escalating tensions in the contested territory and threatening a fragile truce that has held in the region for almost 3 decades. Authorities in Morocco said on Friday that their forces had moved into the buffer strip at the Gourguerat zone following weeks of provocations from members of the Polisario Front, a pro-independence movement. Tensions in the region date to 1975. For years, the Polisario fought for independence from Morocco in an armed resistance that lasted until 1991, when the United Nations negotiated an armistice between the two parties. Since October 21, the Polisario Front has blocked the movement of goods and people along the key road in the area connecting Morocco and Mauritania. Morocco's Ministry of Foreign Affairs accused the group of carrying out acts of banditry and harassing UN peacekeeping forces operating in the region. The road lies at the junction of the part of the disputed territory controlled by Morocco and cuts across the buffer strip towards the borders between Western Sahara and Mauritania. Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa's president and the current chairman of the African Union, on Thursday asked officials in Morocco and Western Sahara to de-escalate tensions and return to the negotiating table.
Well, with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of Africa Today. Till tomorrow with another crew, it's goodbye. Thank you for watching.